What is going on, YouTube? Hope you guys are doing fantastic today. I just got a haircut, so I need some compliments on it, because if I don't, then, I'm going to be sad about myself. So maybe say, yo, Bobby, your haircut looks fantastic today.
You're ugly.
I see you guys all commenting down there. Thank you. Today, we're going to be talking about 10 items that are underbought, and through their underboughtness, are they underbought for a good reason, like they are absolutely terrible, bad items that stink, or are they misunderstood and they're actually not that bad, and there are some games where they have this niche where you should be buying them? Or on the other hand, is it a busted item and just nobody knows about it? We'll find out. Start with 10 items. Starting with Dawnbringer. Probably my favorite item in the game currently. Dawnbringer is a 30 power, 250 health, 20% CCR, and when your ultimate is finished casting, your protections and movement speed are increased by 10% for each enemy god within 55 units of you, stacking 3 times for the next 6 seconds. This effect can only occur once every 30 seconds, but it's your ultimate. Your ultimate is almost always going to be above 30 seconds, so that cooldown part doesn't really matter that much. It's just for small exploits like stand switches like King Arthur, so we don't really need to talk about that too much. It's not too big of a deal. So what makes Dawnbringer actually so good? It's a really bad early game item. It's got not great stats, but this passive when you get to the late game is absurd. So let's take a look at a late game warrior build with just about every item that you need and then a Dawnbringer slapped in last. This Dawnbringer will be increasing your power by 2 times in a build like this. Ignore it's on Alma. I just built an item or built some items that are just good in solo lane because I don't want to just talk about every item that this would work with, but just specifically a build like this. Sundering Axe, Glads, Genjis, Archdruids, Glorious Pridwin, and then Dawnbringer. Sundering Axe gives you 25 protections of each, and damaging an enemy god deals 3% plus 1.5% of your protections from items of their current health away from the target and restores it to you. This effect can occur only once every 10 seconds. Glad Shield, 15 damage plus 25% of your protections from items and abilities as physical damage every time you hit an enemy with an ability. And then Glorious Pridwin, when an ultimate has finished casting, you create an explosion dealing 65% of your protections from items and abilities as magical damage and slowing the targets by 25% for 3 seconds in a 30 unit radius. Then you gain a shield equal to 90% of your protections from items and abilities for 5 seconds. When destroyed, by timing out or being depleted, you explode again. This can only occur once every 45 seconds. So we have a lot of things that are based on your protections. Sundering, Glad Shield, Pridwin. Dawnbringer actually increases your protections by 10%. A full build with Alma in this scenario is going to be having 209 physical, 204 magical. Dawnbringer, when you cast your ultimate, actually stacks with the Pridwin. The Dawnbringer procs first, giving you an extra Pridwin shield. Every god within you, when you ult, Dawnbringer is going to be giving you 20 protections of each. So if you hit it with 3 people around you, this 209 and 204 will be about 269 and 264. Obviously, it'll be slightly more. It'll be about 266 and 265 or something like that. We're not going to talk about specifics like that. But this Dawnbringer just enhances all the other damage from Sundering, Glad Shield, Glorious Pridwin, and then it also gives you extra damage on top of it from the physical power. Warriors scale very well with physical power because their auto attacks do 100% extra damage based on your physical power. Comparatively to like a Guardian, they don't get as much value from power because their autos are only 20% of the power they get. So Amma, instead of only hitting for 30 on autos, is going to be hitting for 60 on her autos, and then also getting extra scaling on all of her abilities, and then also getting extra damage on her protections from Glad Shield, Sundering Axe, and Glorious Pridwin. And then she also gets movement speed from the Dawnbringer, also giving her extra survivability. Now, yes, I did talk a lot about that item, but I really think Dawnbringer is an underpurchased item, and I think it is very, very valuable as a late game asset to any warrior or jungle build that could use the extra protections and extra movement speed. Maybe I slightly overvalue it because there is a lot of good items in solo lane and a lot of good items in jungle right now, but just try out Dawnbringer. Let me know what you guys think as a last item or a 5th item. I think it feels fantastic, and I'm big on the Dawnbringer. Next up, Runeforged, and we're going to talk about Runeforged combined with its glyphs. I think Runeforged as an item is fine. It's okay. It's a little expensive. The stats aren't great. The passive is mediocre. So like overall, it's a 5 out of 10 item. But when you include both the glyphs, Rune Breaking and Flameforged, let's take a look at what you're getting from Flameforged. So on top of the runic symbol you get on the ground that lasts for 5 seconds and the enemies take 10% more damage, the enemies get 5 plus 7% of your protections from items and abilities as magical damage every 1 second while inside the rune and 2 seconds after leaving it. Now, this item never made sense to me why it was nerfed. For some reason, this item caught a nerf way back when they added in this glyph, the patch after they nerfed this item. I thought it was a cool item as is, and I thought that it would maybe have a niche. But right now, the damage on this item is way too low to actually get value from an item that costs 2,900 gold. Now, looking to the opposite side, Rune Breaking. Rune Breaking is almost the same thing as just Runeforged, but instead of only doing 10%, they only take 10% extra damage. They're also doing 10% less. The downside with the rune breaking is it lasts 3 seconds. A lot of the time when you're building an item like this, you're wanting that value over a longer period of time. You're not building this item on a full damage god because that 20% swing is pretty irrelevant when you're just going to be one-shotting them anyway. And I think the downside of this item is if it was 5 seconds, you'd see more value from this as a solo laner or a support or just a tankier warrior in the jungle. Runeforged as an item is just, you're just going to get more value from the Runeforged doing the extra damage because it's just not worth the 600 gold to do 10% less. It's just not worth it when you're just one-shotting the enemy god anyway. So I think that's the downside of rune breaking. Flameforge will start with, it just needs to be more than 7% of your protections. Everything else is fine. It would be valuable if it was like 10, maybe 12% of your protections. Rune breaking, kick it up to 5 seconds. That should be the value of this one. And then I really think Runeforged just needs slight stat tweaks or a slight cost drop. If you make this item 2,200 gold, or maybe just give it an extra 5 power, extra 10 HP 5, 50 health, something like that, so it just has slightly better stats, I really think this item would be bought a lot more. But as is right now, I think it's just not valuable enough. Mystical Mail. By golly, I love this item, but boy, it stinks. It is just so expensive when you compare it to other tier 1 items you are getting. Contagion, 2,250. Phalanx 2200, Breastplate of Regrowth 2250, Berserkers 2300, even Glad Shields, which just got nerfed, is still 2350, and then Mystical Mail is 2450. Now the stats on the item are okay. They're not great. The passive again, okay. I really think if this item just had a slight price drop down to 2350 or even 2300, or just giving it extra stats so it's actually worth that 2450 price. As is, you're just getting more value from Glads and Berserkers and Regrowth, Contagion. All those other items are just going to be more valuable. Combining it with getting it online quicker, you're just getting a lot more value from the item. Mystical Mail is like this nice full tank. I need something to help me clear item. And even then, you're going to be getting more value from just like a Breastplate to spam abilities more, or Glad Shield to just get your abilities doing more damage to enemy gods. Mystical Mail doesn't make a ton of sense ever. Canineers. As a lot of you guys may know, I'm a big Canineers fan. I think I want it to be good, and so I try to convince myself that like, oh, there's a lot of extra gold you're getting. In reality, you're just putting yourself in too big of a deficit for a first item. For supports, your first item spike needs to be super valuable because this is when you are the strongest. Sentinels or Benevolence or War Flag into your first item is when a support spikes the hardest. Thebes, Prophetic, Sov, all spike harder, are all better at the first part of the game than Canineers is because of the stats wise and just what you are getting from the item. Canineers maybe eventually outscales these items when you're getting to late game and you don't need that extra 10, 15, 30 protections of each. But the early game is the important part of the game. Canineers, like I said, maybe outscales, but it's just such an ineffective item because of kind of delaying your early game or making your early game worse in favor of having a slightly maybe better mid game or slightly better late game. And you also have to be on top of this cooldown. 7 seconds is over. You need to be hitting something to get that extra gold value. That is the entire point of the item, is to try to give yourself and an ally a small gold lead over time. But Canineers doesn't really allow you to have a strong 2v2, so even if you are out farming in that regard, you're probably losing minions to either tower or you're getting pushed under and losing your buffs because you just have a worse spike than the enemy, and that's the downside to Canineers. Honestly, I don't really know what you'd want to do with this item because it kind of is, I mean, like, it's a fine item. Maybe if you could convince like a 30 protections of each, but that's 2,000 gold for 30 protections of each, 250 health and 20 HP 5, which does seem super valuable even outside of support. So maybe it like becomes a solo abusable item or something. I think it's okay as is. I just think there's more valuable items currently. Abyssal Stone. Another item I think is actually very underrated. Successful ability damage to an enemy god applies a debuff that afflicts them with 20% CDR for 5 seconds, and this can only occur once every 5 seconds. If you are looking to 1v1 somebody and you are blinking on them and you're able to get that 20% negative CCR or CDR onto the enemy before they can even use an ability, it is actually insane the value you get from this item. 2350 gold for 35 protections of each and 250 health. So let's think of this in a scenario where it's actually plausible. You're playing solo lane Wukong, and the enemy Agni is walking up into the jungle, and you're both looking at the mid camps on solo side. You blink onto the Agni, you have Abyssal Stone, and you hit him with an ability before his 1, 2, and 3 are even used. For the next 5 seconds, if he tries to use an ability, you'll be adding just about 2 to 3 seconds to every single one of his abilities. So Path of Flames is a 15-second cooldown. If you can hit the Agni when he has no cooldown, so say he has just Conduit into Book of Thoth and he's going for an uber late game build and he's got true 15-second cooldown on Path of Flames. If you blink onto him, hit him with an ability before he can use his Path of Flames, this becomes an 18-second cooldown which makes it so this 1v1 is going to be a lot harder for him to get out of. If he dashes away, it's now 3 extra seconds until he's able to use another ability. Same with Flame Wave. Usually you're putting points into this to get it lower in cooldown, so we'll say it's down to 14 seconds. It's adding about 2.8 seconds onto this ability, making this a 16, almost 17 second cooldown. So if he uses it in this 1v1 trade, instantly you have a 3-second advantage on cooldowns. Again, let's go to solo lane. You're able to hit the tier with an ability before it comes off cooldown, so you can actually afflict him with it. You blink on it, or you just walk at him and you hit him. Fearless becomes an 18-second cooldown. Power Cleave becomes a 14-second cooldown. Change Stance becomes a 12-second cooldown. Like, cooldowns actually fly up a lot. The value you're actually getting from this Abyssal Stone makes trading with you just that much harder because you're putting so much more cooldowns on them. Obviously, it's going to be a lot more useless when you're hitting a hunter because they don't really care too much about cooldowns. If they use their jump one time in a fight, they're kind of just dying anyway, or they're going to be carrying the fight. So Abyssal Stone, I think, is just a wholly underrated item, and I think it needs to be bought a little bit more and abused a little bit more. Next up, Atalantas. I don't even know what to say about this item because I complain about this item all the time. This is probably the worst statted item, worst passive item, worst cost item for the stats in the entire game.
This guy stinks!
30 power, 25% attack speed, 10 flat pen for 2,500 gold. And the passive is, off a kill, you get benefits of attack speed and movement speed penalty. Probably the worst item in the entire game. If this were me and I was in charge of Smite and I wanted to make Atalantas an exciting item or something like that, I think the old passive of getting movement speed, or like the old boomerang thing, was just a lot more valuable. This current passive is just absolutely useless. I think this item also made a lot more sense when it was 10% physical pen instead of 10 flat pen. It actually made sense for the 2,400 gold. As is, this item should be reduced down to 2,000 gold, maybe 2,100. So it is an early game kind of quick spike item that you can maybe look to abuse with physical pen, power, attack speed. This passive is just useless. Slap something else on there, get rid of this current one, or just make it super cheap so it's actually got some value at some point in the game. Really, I have nothing else to say with this item other than it is just terrible. Sphinx's Bobble. This one's going to be quick because I am confident that Sphinx's Bobble would be in a fine spot if it just got rid of the downsides now of magical protections reduced by 10% and physical protection by 10%. I think the healing output decrease makes sense because it really would be annoying playing against a Hell or an Afro or just some healer and having them healing 10% faster every time for 10% more cool or 20% more cooldown. I think the 20% healing decrease makes sense. Touching the physical and magical protections is a good thing. Remove that 10%. Downside is a good thing. Keep the healing output decrease because, like I said, cooldown on characters that have healing so they can heal even more sounds very, very frustrating. But I think this item needs that 20% cooldown reduction so you can actually hit that overcap with this item. It's very weird that you get 10% on the tier 2 and then you get no upgrade when you get the cap increase. I think they should make this item just 20% cooldown with the same exact stats and then remove the downside of the magical and physical pen. I think, or magical and physical protections reduced. I think that would make this item very good, and I think some gods will actually look to buy this item. Vital Amplifier. I just have a problem with this item in the fact that Smite is really weird with auto attacks, increasing attack speed and lowering your attack speed every, like, super often. Like when you're walking in and out of somebody's Shogun's range or somebody's Witchblade range, your autos desync all the time. And that's the reason I don't like this item. I think it's actually a good item, but because of always getting desynced autos, it feels very, very weird and very, very frustrating. I don't know how you fix that. If the item didn't desync all the time with my autos, I would buy this all the time. But just because of that one problem with the desyncs, I will never buy this item. And that's maybe partially why I think it's underbought, because as is, the item looks good stats-wise, cost-wise, what you're getting from it. It makes sense. I just think the desyncs make it problematic. And the last two items, Rejuvenating Heart, just got buffed. Will I buy it? No. This item makes no sense anywhere. Successfully hitting an enemy god with basic attacks and abilities provide a stack of 10% healing dealt that is consumed by the next heal from an ability, max 5 stacks. So your next heal after hitting basic attacks and abilities gives you 10% extra healing, stacking up to 5. So in a perfect world, the best thing to do is get 5 hits into a heal, 5 hits into a heal, 5 hits into a heal. Asclepius is just 30% healing dealt increased, and you're also giving allies 10% increased cooldown within 30 units. It doesn't make sense what this item is looking to accomplish when Rod of Asclepius, to be min-maxed better than a Rod of Asclepius, just on the healing portion of it, you have to hit 4 autos or abilities and then proc your cooldown instantly. And then 4 and then proc your cooldown instantly. And you can't do it faster because then you're going to interrupt your own ability and you won't get as much healing. Rod of Asclepius also gives increased cooldown, so you're just able to spam a little bit more. The stats are nearly the same, and then you're just paying 150 extra gold. This item is completely outdone by Rod of Asclepius. Rejuvenating Heart sounds like something where it should be you're getting low, and then if you get healed, you get like a big pop off or something like that. Like maybe if you're below 30% health and you get a heal from an ally or from yourself, you get 10% movement speed. And maybe 10% decreased damage taken or something like that. Something where it's actually like a niche thing where it actually feels good to buy instead of this weird mini game where you have to hit abilities into autos and then back out and then heal and then do it again. It makes it feel very, very bad. Lastly, the item we're going to be talking about is Gem of Isolation. And this is an item that I think is actually underbought. 65 power, 150 health, 10% CCR. And the passive is enemies hit by your damaging abilities will move 30% slower and will have shield applied on them reduced by 50% for 2.5 seconds. And this can only occur once every 8 seconds. For 25-50 gold, it's actually a pretty valuable item. The slow is 30%, which is super strong, especially for 2.5 seconds. And this cooldown is 8 seconds. It's something you can spam and actually hit and harass the enemy with and slow them by a strong amount and play around that. Say as Athena, you dash taunt somebody with Gem of ISO and their support has heroism. Instead of that heroism being a 700 shield, it's 350. They're also 30% slowed from that also. This Gem of Isolation is very easy to abuse, and you can actually use it to counter heroism, because heroism's one thing is off CC, they will get a shield. If you can maneuver to a point where you can actually just harass the person who's getting the heroism and make it hit somebody, and then just reduce that shield, instantly your support starter is just going to be more valuable than enemy support starter, because heroism is not a very good statted item. That's why I think Gem is actually a little bit underbought. I do think it's a little niche, and I do think it's a little bit of a counter pick item. But even if you ignore the shielding portion of it, a 30% slow for 2.5 seconds on an 8-second cooldown, you can 100% harass the enemy with slows and just artillery from across the map. It is very painful to play against. The one downside I think it has is that it's a little hard to kind of work into a build, but as like a last item, a 6th item or something like that, or a 6th item on support, I think it has a lot of value. So there it is, 10 items that I think are super underrated, overrated, perfect, underbought, whatever. Let me know what you guys think. Is there any items that you guys really think are underbought, maybe that I even missed, or any items that you think are like Atalanta's? Maybe you're an Atalanta's fiend. Let me know down below. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll see you guys again next time. Peace.